Okay, let's talk about timing on RDs, R5s, DS7s, pretty much well any Yamaha twin or single for that matter. This is an old beater 72 DS7 I picked up last week. Actually in pretty nice shape. It's about a 5,000 mile bike. And we're going to talk about timing points, which this principle is going to kind of hold true for CDIs and like vintage smoke or neutronics type ignitions or anything, but the basic principles are all based off of this type of a ignition system. And what we're going to talk about finding the point where it's going to fire is going to be verifying crank position to where the ignition triggers by using a dial gauge and setting the pointer. And by a dial gauge, if you don't know what this is, these are dial gauges. This is an old central tools unit. This is a period piece that actually has the correct adapters for it. So it has the gauge, the spark plug adapter, the extensions. I've had this forever. Here's another one. Doesn't have the adapters, but it works with this. It's just the gauge. Here is a factory Yamaha one that I picked up not that long ago that actually also has the spark plug adapter, the extensions, and the gauge. And this is actually pretty cool. This is probably the one I'm going to use because I haven't used this one yet. The other tools you need, the way I'm going to do it, which is very, very rudimentary, is a light. This is just a 12 volt panel light with some alligator clips on it. 12 volt, 12 millimeter wrench. You need, of course, a number 3 GIS crosshead to pull the cover off if your stuff's still stock, or an Allen key if you went to Allen bolts. And on this bike, since it's old school and original, they've got flatheads here. On yours, you're probably going to have a number 2 GIS crosshead, like here, to do the points, but this is flathead. And this little funky thing here is actually, it was in my timing kit. This is actually for doing CDIs, like vapes and things like that. This is a fixed position that you would put here for an external rotor. I made this a long time ago, but since we're not doing one of these, this is going to go back in the box and just get out of the way. But even the principles for doing that are going to be similar to this. So what I did was I went ahead and I pulled the spark plugs out. I have not timed this thing since I got it a week ago, although it runs really good. We're just going to verify it. On R5s and DS7s, if you have an original alternator, and I think some of the smaller like AT1s and DTs are like this, you have an adjustable timing pointer here. If you look really close, you can see there's a slot there and a mark. There should be a mark on the inside of the rotor. On most RD250s and 350s, and even the 400s, you have a scribed mark on the alternator up here, and there's a mark on the outside of the alternator rotor. But this, we need to verify this first. So what we're going to do is we're going to take one of the dial gauges and put it in the plug hole, and we're going to go ahead and find crank position. Stock on this is 2.0 millimeters before top dead center. I'm going to set it to 1.8. It's just safer with modern fuel. Runs good, get a little more overrun, runs a little cooler. So I'm going to put this thing back in the third hand vise here and get the dial gauge and set it in the motor. So here's the gauge with the plug adapter. I just threaded it out all together. This threads into the plug hole. Obviously it fits with the tank on, not a problem. And you're going to want to set the thumb screw first, at least snug. Get it in there. There we go. So dial gauge is in. I'm going to go and get this a little closer. It's going to be relevant. And if you look at the gauge, it's sitting on 0. I haven't moved the motor yet, so I'm going to roll the motor over in the direction of running, which is as you're facing it counterclockwise. Rotor always moves in the same direction of the wheels of the bike when it's running. So go ahead and move this. As I roll the crank over here with the 12 millimeter wrench, the piston's going to move up, and it should affect where this is. There we go. Okay, you saw the needle swing real far and then come back. So what I'm doing is I'm backing it up and I'm going to go roll it forward until it stops and it dwells. Right there, it stopped. And then you'll see it starts coming back. So back here, this is top dead center. One revolution of the needle on the gauge is 1 millimeter. This face is a slip fit, so once you find where it is and set it to 0, you set the gauge to 0. So that's 0, that's top dead center. Now what you want to do is you want to go ahead and get it back 1.8 revolutions. So it's going to come, you're going to rotate the crank. People say not to do this, but I've never found this to be a problem. You rotate it backwards, which is clockwise. One revolution that's on the gauge is 1 millimeter before top dead center. You go back again, and that's 2 millimeter. But we talked about setting it to 1.8. So I'm going to go back forward to where it's at here, which is 0.2 millimeter before top dead center. So if I rotate this around back to top dead center, it'll go from 20 to 0 is 80, and then one more revolution is going to be 1.8. So right now the crank is where I want it to fire. Let's see where the timing pointers are. And I haven't looked at this before, so I'm learning this as you are. So if we look down here, I'm going to set this down for a minute because I got cables everywhere. Can't quite see it. Let me get a flashlight. So if you look way up in there, I don't know if you can see it show up, the mark on the rotor is actually a little bit off from the pointer. Now you really won't run into this on a 350 like an RD or a 400, but you will on one of these with a movable pointer. So I need to move this pointer to where it lines up with that little notch on the rotor. I think I can see it there. And then you'll have a timing mark that actually is 1.8. So I need to move this thing, the pointer needs to go back that way until it lines up, just a hair. Put this back in the holder here. There we go. All right, it's moved. So now the mark lines up with the mark on the rotor. I don't know if you can see it, but that little bit moved it. So now we can check the timing on it. Now my preference, and I will do this, is to actually use a timing light and actually run it and check it against the mark. However, if you don't want to go through all this and you live in the Stone Age and you want to keep doing it manually and you care about what the RPM is at 0, then you can do it this way. And if you just don't have a timing light or want to do a quick verification, this is a good way to go. This is where the little panel light, 12-volt panel light, comes into play. And I mean, I was doing this when I was, 20, didn't have any money, and my timing light was broken. So, this is what we're supposed to be checking. Didn't even think about it. Okay. As you're facing, this is a mistake on my bad. As you're facing the motor, the left cylinder is going to be the left points. The right cylinder is going to be the right points. I had it connected to the wrong lead. All right. So, now we're checking the timing on the left cylinder, or number 1. I don't know if you can see it, but the gauge on the top just started moving a little bit. Right there. You can hear the point snap, but right there, the timing light comes on. And the dial gauge is sitting at 0.1. Or 0.12 actually. So I don't know if that's 2.12, 1 point, I don't know what that is. So we know it fires there. So let's see where it lands. So that's way early. See if I can indicate this. So I can move the light up a little bit here. See if we can get a better idea of what's going on. I can illustrate it. The timing was set wrong on this thing. So if you look at the dial gauge, there's top dead center, right? So we need this to rotate 1.8 revolutions back for that to go off. That's where it should be. 1.15, way too advanced. So we need to move the points on this. And if you look at the points, you can tell that they're all the way over on one slot or the other. I didn't get into gapping them or anything, but I figured this would just be a good way to to illustrate how far off this can be. Even if the bike runs good, which it did, this is the first time I've checked it. It's way out of whack. So we need to move the points plate down here. So I'm going to turn the key off so I don't run the battery down. So we're going to rotate these in this direction. Snug it back up a little bit and see where we're at now. Key back on. Back it up. We'll roll it forward and watch the gauge. Okay, so went ahead and moved the points. I think the camera filled or something. Anyway, moved the points, moved them back to the middle here. Notice the light's on. So we're going to check the position of this again and see exactly where we're at. See, it was actually retarded before, not advanced. Sorry. I'm usually not talking to somebody when I do this. Alright, so we'll back it up. We're going to go ahead and roll this forward. And you can watch the gauge. It starts moving. Right there is where the light comes on. Back it off. Right there. So we're sitting at 0.2 millimeter. 1, 2. Technically that would be acceptable if it was stock. It's within range, but not really. So what we need to do is back that off like 0.25 millimeter. And by doing that, we need to go ahead and retard the timing a little bit. Since the rotation works this way for the crank as it's running, we need to rotate this in the same direction so it fires a little later. So loosen that up a little bit. Move that a bit. Always re-snug it. And then we'll back it up again. We'll check it again. Right there it came on. One. A little more. Here we go. So right there. Back it up. Go again slow. Plus 0.3. So we're going to count the revolutions from there. 1.1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 6.5. 1.6. 1.7, there we go. So it's a little late. So fiddle with it again. This time we go back in the other direction. We want to advance it just 0.1 millimeter. So this has to go back and up, or counterclockwise, or clockwise, should I say. So just a smidge. Back it up. Right about there. This looks like it's going to be good. See there? 0.2. If you notice, by doing it statically like this, it kind of tends to fluctuate a little bit. You're never going to get it exactly right doing it this way. You're going to get it close. You're going to get it safe. But here we go. So rolling it in the direction. About 0.2 it comes on. It's 1 revolution. So it's 1 millimeter. 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, 1.4, 1.5, 1.6, 0.7, 1.8. That's at a point. The left cylinder is now firing at 1.8 millimeter before top dead center, which on this thing, which is like I said, dead stock and kind of a beater, is just fine. So then you tighten up both screws and you rotate it. You rotate it around. I like to rotate it all the way around. Watch the gauge and the light. Until this comes back up again. Notice the needle started moving, so I'll start going slower. Back it up. See, it's now it's at 0.4. And herein lies the inherent problem of doing it this way, is that as you move shit and it's stable, it's going to shift statically. So you could do this all day long and dick around with it and you'll finally get it right. Maybe. But 1 millimeter, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So now we're sitting at 1.6 before top dead center. That is not cool. So this is why I prefer to use a timing light. And that's what we're going to get to next. Okay, so now that we learned that doing it with a light, with an idiot light, is going to be kind of a pain, we're going to go to a timing light. There's an untypical and automotive inductive timing light. Clamps onto the plug lead, powers off the battery. I just grounded it off the head. And we are going to verify the timing on this, because We don't care what it does when the motor's not running. What we care about is what it's doing as it runs. So we're going to use the timing light, and since we use the dial indicator to verify the timing mark here and here again on the rotor, which is really the best use for the dial gauge, we're going to go ahead and run this, and we're going to aim the timing light at it, and hopefully this will pick up in the GoPro and you can see it. If not, you get the point. So let me reposition the camera here. Okay, so the pickup for the timing light is now on the left cylinder, or the right cylinder, or number 2. Getting a strobe out of it. Now we know that when we tried setting this before, at this set of points, which is for number 2 or the right side, it was shifting around. So I suspect the timing is going to be off on this one. And now it's timed correctly while it's running. Check it again. Good move. Now, while revving it up and doing that isn't necessarily necessary, what it does do is if there's anything wants to settle, sometimes that'll kind of help. But this thing is dead stock. It's never been modified. It's never been hacked. And but we were a little off just using the dial gauge. Timing light is always the best way to do it. I don't care what the guy that's been working at the Yamaha dealership for 120 years says, you know, or your neighbor Bob or anything else. There's a reason they don't use dial gauges to set timing in high performance motors. They never did it on Kawasaki triples. You couldn't do it on Suzuki's unless you pulled the cylinder head off. It is there to verify the timing mark and then to use a timing light. Basically, that's it. Anyway, my opinion, that's the best way to do it. Buy yourself a timing light. It's cheaper than a piston. And you can use it on other things if you need to. But it always works, even with something as basic and simple as a set of points on an old beat DS7. So, good luck with it. Hope this helps somebody. Bye. And just for posterity, some pictures of the bike that I was actually just setting the timing on. It's a 72 DS7. Looked like it suffered from a rattle can resto at some point. Came out of Ohio. Looks like there was surface rust on a lot of this, so most of the chrome was shot except for the pipes for some unknown reason. This is pretty much how I bought it cosmetically. Just been going through all the other stuff, the little mechanical stuff. Runs and rides nice, works okay, gonna get fixed up, not gonna be restored, gonna be used. And but yeah, seems like it runs pretty good. All right. Good luck with timing your bike. And, all right, hopefully you keep the pistons sunroof free.